Have you ever walked into your own birthday party and realized it wasn't for you? That night, I blew out the candles on a cake that didn't even have my name on it. Then my father stood up, raised his glass, and said 10 words that shattered everything I thought I knew about my life. We have something to confess. Ava, you were switched at birth. I didn't cry. Not then. Because when your whole world collapses in public, the first thing you learn is how to stay still. Let me take you back to how it all started. The text, the dinner, and the lie they'd been hiding for 30 years. I was halfway through a double shift at St. Mary's when my phone buzzed. The screen lit up with a message from my sister, Lily. Dinner at Harborview Rooftop. 7 p.m. Dad has something to say. Don't be late. No emoji. No happy birthday. Not even a question. Just a command. And the weirdest part? It wasn't from Mom. It wasn't even in our family group chat. It was a direct message. Private. Intentional. I stared at it for a second, wiping sweat from the bridge of my nose. The ICU was packed, and I hadn't had more than a granola bar since sunrise. But something about that message, it scratched at the back of my brain like a loose nail on a floorboard. Dad has something to say. He's never had anything to say. Not to me anyway. I'm Ava, 30 years old, registered nurse, calm under pressure. The one who never missed a birthday, who sent flowers on anniversaries, who drove home every Thanksgiving, even when no one noticed I was there. And yet somehow I was always the extra, the afterthought, the one taking the pictures, not in them. Lily, on the other hand, was the family's front page. 4 years younger. A social media darling with her own makeup line and 3 million followers. Blonde, bright, always camera ready. Our parents adored her. They didn't say it out loud. They didn't need to. So when I got that message on my own birthday, I almost didn't go. But something in me, something tired and foolish and still hoping, thought, maybe this time it'll be different. Maybe the dinner was a surprise party. Maybe they remembered. Maybe they cared. I was 30 after all. Maybe this was the year I'd finally matter. I rushed out of work, changed in the hospital bathroom, threw on a black dress I kept in my car for emergencies. Not that this was an emergency, but something about it felt like one. By the time I pulled into the rooftop parking garage, the sun was dipping low behind the city skyline. Harborview Rooftop wasn't just a restaurant. It was the restaurant. Reservations booked out months in advance. The kind of place with live jazz, gold utensils, and $50 cocktails. Lily's kind of place. Not mine. I stepped into the elevator, watching my reflection flicker in the brass doors. My lipstick was uneven. I hadn't had time to fix my hair. I felt small already, like I was walking into a room I was never meant to be in. The host greeted me by name and ushered me past white linen tables and slow music toward a private glass room overlooking the water. I could already hear laughter. My family's laughter. For a moment I smiled. Maybe this was it. Maybe they really had planned something. A surprise. A toast. A moment of acknowledgement. But as soon as I stepped inside, my heart stopped. There were balloons, white and gold. A banner stretched across the glass that read, "Happy birthday to our one and only daughter Lily." The table erupted in cheers as I entered. But not for me. Lily was standing near the head of the table, wearing a silver dress that sparkled under the chandelier. Mom was snapping photos. Dad had a glass of champagne in hand. My seat, if there was one, wasn't set. I blinked, froze, felt my stomach twist. Mom looked over and smiled like I just arrived to deliver the cake. "Oh good, you made it," she said. Then turned back to Lily. And that was the moment I knew. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a forgotten birthday. This was something else entirely. A performance. A reveal. And I wasn't the star. I wasn't even the understudy. Still holding my purse, I stood there, unsure if I should sit, speak, or run. And then Dad raised his glass. "We have something to share tonight," he said. "Something we've kept for 30 years. Everyone turned to look at me. And in that second I realized, this dinner wasn't for celebration. It was for confession. and I was about to learn something that would tear my life in two. You know how people say they remember the exact moment their life changed? For me it was a champagne flute, half full, sparkling under rooftop lights, and my father's voice steady but too rehearsed. He raised his glass and said, "There's something we've been meaning to tell you, Ava. Something overdue." The whole table went quiet. Lily looked giddy like she already knew. Mom folded her hands in her lap, her lips tight but not trembling, not like mine were. I felt my stomach turn. It wasn't the food. It was the way no one looked surprised. Dad cleared his throat. "I want you to know this doesn't change how much we care about you. But the truth is, you're not biologically our daughter." It didn't land right away. My brain just stalled. Not their daughter? Was this a joke? Some kind of twisted birthday prank? But then Mom chimed in. "You were switched at birth, sweetie. At St. Mercy Hospital. It was a terrible mistake. We didn't find out until much later, but by then, we'd already raised you. We loved you." Loved. Past tense. I looked at Lily. She was beaming. "This all started with my ancestry video," she said. "I did one of those DNA kits for a brand deal and the results were wild. Totally not what we expected." She laughed like it was a punchline. Like my entire identity was part of her influencer content calendar. I matched with this whole other family. And when Mom and Dad did theirs, it all added up. She continued, swirling her wine. "I'm their biological daughter. You're not." Just like that. "You're not." I was still standing near the edge of the room, too far from the table to steady myself. No one offered me a seat. No one reached out a hand. No one said sorry. I wanted to scream. To ask why they'd waited until my 30th birthday, my night, to drop a bomb and watch me burn. But all I could manage was, "When did you find out?" Dad looked at the floor. Mom glanced at Lily. No one answered. That's when I knew. They hadn't just found out. They'd known. For years. Maybe decades. And they'd chosen not to tell me. I backed up a step, felt my shoulder bump the glass wall behind me. The city lights sparkled below like nothing had happened. But inside me everything had fractured. I wasn't their daughter. Not legally. Not biologically. Just a mix-up. A mistake they raised out of obligation. Lily poured herself another drink. "To new beginnings," she said with a grin. Then the waiter arrived. He walked straight past my parents. Past Lily. Stopped in front of me. "Miss Ava?" he asked. I nodded, still frozen. He handed me a small sealed envelope. Heavy. Cream-colored. My name was handwritten across the front. Not the last name I'd grown up with. Just Ava. "The gentleman at the bar asked me to give this to you," the waiter said quietly. "But he's already left." I turned toward the bar, but it was empty. I looked back at the envelope in my hand. Everyone at the table was staring. Not out of concern. Not with warmth. With curiosity. Like they were watching the next episode of a show they weren't part of. And that's when something inside me shifted. The room hadn't gone quiet. I had. I couldn't hear the music anymore. Or the chatter. All I could hear was the soft weight of that envelope in my hand. And one thought playing over and over in my mind. If I wasn't their daughter, then who was I? Whatever the answer was, it wasn't sitting at that table. It was inside that envelope. And I wasn't ready to open it. Not here. Not in front of them. Not while I was still bleeding from the words they just poured like wine. So I smiled. Just enough to keep my pride. Then I walked toward the elevator, with 30 years of love unraveling behind me. And the truth tucked in my coat pocket, waiting to finish what their toast had started. I didn't open the envelope in the elevator. I didn't open it in my car either. I just sat there, staring at my own name like it belonged to someone else. The paper was thick. Heavy. Like the truth inside it had weight. And maybe it did. Because when I finally tore it open in the silence of my apartment hours later, everything I thought I knew about myself unraveled line by line. The handwriting was elegant, slanted, deliberate. Like every letter had been written with care. Like it mattered. It read, Ava, if you're reading this, it means they finally told you. Or maybe they told you just enough to hurt you and not enough to explain. My name is Eleanor Davis. I'm your birth mother. I stopped breathing. Birth mother? The words didn't make sense in my head. They didn't fit with the family photos on the wall, the school projects signed Mom and Dad, the decades of trying to earn love that never quite landed. The letter went on. You were born on April 22, 1993, at St. Mercy Hospital in Seattle. I was 21, young, scared, but ready. You were the only thing in the world that made sense. Until you were gone. She explained everything. The chaos of that night. The nurse who brought her the wrong baby to hold. The panic. The confusion. The official record said the mix-up was caught and corrected. But it wasn't. They told me I was mistaken. That the baby I held, the one I knew in my bones was mine, wasn't. They made me doubt myself. And then they moved you. I felt cold all over. Like someone had opened a window inside my chest and let the wind in. I searched for you for years, she wrote. I sent letters, filed reports, begged lawyers. But no one would listen. Until one day I received a letter back. Anonymous. Short. It said, she's alive. She's with the Thompsons. And they're never going to tell her. The Thompsons. Thomas and Karen. The people I called Mom and Dad my whole life. The letter wasn't angry. It wasn't bitter. It was full of ache. Of a kind of love I didn't recognize because I'd never been given it like this before. Eleanor included details only someone who knew me could have guessed. My birthmark behind my right knee. How I hated pacifiers as a baby. How I would hum myself to sleep instead of crying. And at the very end of the letter she wrote, if you want to know more, if you want answers, if you want the rest of your story, I'm still here. I never stopped being your mother. And I will never stop hoping you'll come find me. She left an address. It was 15 minutes from where I sat. I looked around my apartment. Everything suddenly felt like a movie set. The books. The framed degrees. The nurse uniform I'd folded with pride just the night before. None of it felt like mine anymore. Because if Eleanor was telling the truth, and somehow I knew she was, then I'd spent 3 decades living someone else's version of my life. And the people who could have told me didn't. I picked up the envelope again. Read the return address over and over. 15 minutes. That was all it would take to start unraveling the rest. To hear the full story. To meet the woman who'd been erased from my life before I could even say her name. I grabbed my keys. For once I wasn't walking toward people who lied. I was heading toward someone who had waited. Every day. For the truth to reach me. I don't remember the drive. It was only 15 minutes across town, but it felt like I was crossing some invisible border, leaving behind the version of me that had always been almost enough, and heading toward someone who might have loved me before I ever had to earn it. Her house was small, tucked between 2 maple trees on a quiet street with cracked sidewalks and wind chimes on every porch. The porch light was on. Not motion sensor bright, but waiting for someone bright. I parked across the street and sat in the car for a full minute. My hands were shaking. My heart was doing something between pounding and breaking. And then the door opened. She stepped onto the porch before I even knocked. Eleanor Davis. She looked nothing like I imagined. No gray hair. No frilly cardigan. She was in jeans, barefoot, a worn flannel rolled up to her elbows, her dark hair pulled back loosely like she'd done it in a hurry. She looked real. Solid. Familiar. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then she said, "You look exactly like your ultrasound did. Just more stubborn." I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because I didn't know what else to do with the air in my lungs. She stepped forward slowly, giving me space to run if I needed to. But I didn't run. She opened her arms. And I walked right into them. It wasn't cinematic. It wasn't perfectly timed. It was just warm and safe. And the first time in 30 years I felt held for no reason other than being myself. Inside, her house smelled like cedar and something faintly sweet. Maybe tea, maybe old books. Nothing pretentious. Nothing posed for Instagram. It was like stepping into the middle of a memory I hadn't made but somehow still belonged to. We sat on her couch. She poured tea neither of us touched. Then she reached for a small wooden box on the coffee table. "I kept everything they didn't take," she said. Inside were hospital bracelets, ultrasound photos, letters she wrote during her pregnancy, and one tiny knitted hat with my name stitched into the hem. "I called you Ava before they did," she smiled, eyes glistening. "I used to whisper your name to my stomach every night." I didn't even know I was crying until she reached out and wiped a tear from my cheek. She told me the whole story. How she was a junior in college when she got pregnant. How she was scared but determined to raise me on her own. How her best friend Karen Thompson, my legal mother, was the only one she trusted in the delivery room. "And then the mix-up," Eleanor said, voice low. "The nurse brought me the wrong baby. I knew it. I felt it. But Karen, she convinced me I was wrong. That I was just exhausted. Confused. And the next day you were gone. I felt a chill crawl up my back. She told me she'd seen a clerical error in the hospital. That she was helping fix it. That everything was fine. But it wasn't. She took you." I stared at the tea I hadn't touched. My hands were trembling again. "She filed for guardianship within a week. And her husband? Thomas had the money to make paperwork disappear. I tried. God, I tried. But every door closed." Eleanor's voice cracked. "I didn't stop writing. I didn't stop looking. I kept everything, hoping someday you'd come to me, or I'd find the right moment to break through. I looked at the letters, the pictures, the baby hat, the life I never lived, and somehow I felt it all: loss, love, betrayal, and something else I hadn't felt in years: peace. Not because I understood it all, but because I finally understood why I'd never felt like I belonged." I looked at her, and I whispered, "You didn't lose me. They just hid me well." Eleanor took my hand. "They can't hide you anymore," she said. "You're home now." The next morning I stood outside the house I'd grown up in, holding both the letter from Eleanor and the truth in my chest like a loaded weapon. It was still decorated. Gold streamers hung from the front door. A balloon bouquet shaped like the number 30 bobbed slightly in the breeze. From the outside, it looked like a happy family had just celebrated something beautiful. But I knew better now. I rang the doorbell. Karen answered, still in her robe, hair slightly undone like she'd just rolled out of bed. She froze when she saw me. "Ava," she said. "I didn't expect." "You didn't expect me to come back after that?" I interrupted. "After you dropped a bomb on my life like it was a party favor?" She opened the door wider, stepping aside. "Come in. Let's talk." I walked through the house I used to call home. Every photo on the wall still had Lily's face front and center. In some of them I was cropped on the edge, half a shoulder, a blurry background figure. Thomas sat at the kitchen island, sipping coffee like this was any other Sunday. Lily was there too, scrolling through her phone, perfectly polished like nothing had changed. I dropped the letter on the table in front of them. Eleanor's words. Her proof. Her truth. "I met her," I said. "Last night." No one moved. I read her letters. I saw the documents. I saw the hospital bracelet she kept. The hat she knitted with my name on it before I was even born. Karen's face went pale. Thomas set his mug down slowly. Lily looked up, finally sensing this wasn't just a dramatic mood swing. "You knew," I said. My voice was steady now, but every syllable burned. "You knew who I was. And you chose not to tell me." Thomas let out a long breath. "Ava, it's complicated." "No," I snapped. "It's not. You stole me. You took me from a mother who wanted me and raised me like a backup plan." Karen tried to speak, but I cut her off. "I was never first. Not once. Not in birthdays, not in family dinners, not in the way you looked at me. You kept me because it was convenient." "We gave you a home," she said quietly. "You gave me a house," I corrected. "Not love. Not belonging. Not the truth." Lily stood then. "I didn't know, okay? I didn't know any of this until recently. And you thought the best time to reveal it was during a birthday dinner?" I turned to her. With a banner calling you the one and only daughter? You made it about you. As always. She looked away, guilt creeping into her carefully curated expression. Thomas finally spoke. We were trying to protect you. Protect me. I laughed. You protected yourselves. From lawsuits. From shame. From being seen as the people who took someone else's child and made her invisible. No one had anything left to say. I picked up the letter from the table, folded it neatly, and slid it back into my bag. I came here today because I needed you to see what you did. I needed to say it to your faces. I'm not asking for apologies. I'm not asking for understanding. I'm not even angry anymore. I turned toward the door. I'm done chasing a family that never wanted me whole. As I reached for the handle, Karen's voice broke behind me. You're still family. I looked over my shoulder. No. I was a secret you tried to live with. Family tells the truth. Family doesn't let you wonder for 30 years if you were ever enough. I stepped outside into the morning light. This time I didn't cry. I didn't look back. And I didn't feel lost. Because for the first time in my life I wasn't begging to stay. I was choosing to leave. The day I changed my last name, I didn't tell anyone but Eleanor. I stood at the courthouse, hands trembling slightly as I signed the petition. I watched as Thompson disappeared and Davis took its place. One quiet moment, one bold step. The clerk stamped the form and handed it back to me with a smile I'll never forget. Welcome home, she said. I walked out into the sunlight, name in hand, a little lighter than before. And for the first time I wasn't carrying someone else's legacy. I was claiming my own. Back at Eleanor's house, my house now too, the guest room had slowly transformed. The walls were covered in pictures of her life. And now mine too. There were baby photos she'd finally put in frames, ultrasound prints, letters she'd never mailed. Her violin leaned in the corner, strings slightly dusty but still full of music. I found myself drawn to it. She had been a musician once. Played for small chamber groups, taught at a local high school before her world cracked open. Now she taught me. I'd come home from shifts at the hospital and we'd sit together, her hands guiding mine, my fingers fumbling through melodies I never knew were part of me. It wasn't just music. It was memory. It was healing. People think discovering the truth will break you. Sometimes it does. But other times it sets you free. I didn't cut off my past out of bitterness. I walked away because it was never really mine. I stopped returning texts that only came out of guilt. I let go of expectations that were never meant for me. I stopped shrinking to fit a story that someone else had written without my name in it. I started a blog. First it was just for me. A way to process, to untangle 3 decades of quiet confusion. But then others found it. People who had been adopted, who had lost mothers too young, who had grown up in homes where love was conditional and silence louder than shouting. We built something together. We called it the Unwritten Daughters. A space for those who didn't fit the picture-perfect family frame. A place to say, I was there too, and have someone believe you. Sometimes Eleanor would sit beside me as I answered emails or posted stories. She'd shake her head in awe and say, all those years I thought I lost you, but maybe you were just on your way back to me. I'd smile and nod, as I understood now. Family isn't just who raises you. It's who fights for you, waits for you, tells the truth, even when it hurts. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever felt like a stranger in your own life, if you've ever been told you were too much or not enough, if you've ever sat at a table where everyone laughed and you wondered how no one noticed your silence, know this, you are not alone. You are not the mistake. You are not defined by the ones who couldn't love you properly. You are allowed to choose something better. You are allowed to walk away from legacy and walk toward truth. And sometimes in that walk, you'll find someone waiting on a porch light that's never been turned off. Someone who never stopped believing you'd come home. If this story spoke to you, I hope you'll subscribe to the channel. We share real, soul-deep stories every week. Stories that remind us we're never as alone as we think. And if you've ever had to rebuild yourself from the ground up, I hope you'll stay for the next video. You might just find a piece of your own truth in someone else's beginning.